So let's put short-run, average costs and marginal costs together with our long-run average costs and marginal costs. So a lot of the detail I'm giving on this video is going way beyond what you necessarily need to know for your specification. You do need to know why diminishing marginal returns occur, but you won't necessarily need to do the numbers behind it or explain it in such detail. Make sure you know the definition, make sure you can relate it to an example. But the reason that I'm putting this together is so that you have the detail, so you really fully understand the curves, why they're moving in certain ways, the trends, etc. And if you can understand it, it's more likely you'll remember it. So, the last video I said that because we're looking at the short run, where the definition of the short run is where one of the factors of production is fixed, there's going to be a maximum output that you can produce. So output along the bottom, cost along the side. Okay, and what we had at the last video was something that looked like this, and that's average costs, and that's marginal costs. And where it's going kind of vertical, I said that that is where your maximum output was. Okay, so if the business is able to expand and they can vary that fixed factor of production. So in this case, it's really interesting to think of maybe a factory. So imagine that a factory has a fixed output, not a fixed output, but a maximum capacity they can produce, 60,000 units a week. Well, in the long run, what they can do is maybe move to a bigger factory or increase the size of their factory by building an extension, something like that. So they're actually able to not only increase their output, but you might find, and I'll explain it in a second, you might find that you have lower average costs. And it moves outwards like that. And as you go on and on, you find that these cost curves move in this kind of direction. So this would be 1, 2, 3. And this is my fourth one. I should be adding the numbers to the marginal cost as well. But this is my fourth one. And then we might find that something unusual happens. We might find that these average cost curves after a certain output start to get a bit larger. They start to go up a bit. Okay. So these little average cost curves that I'm drawing on this diagram are representing average cost curves in the short run. And if we join them up and create a point that's tangential, we get something that looks a little bit like this. Okay, now that red line there represents our long run average cost curve. So these little ones here are actually short run. Okay, I'm not going to add it to all of them because it gets quite complicated. And you might think, okay, but why are they moving in that way? Why, when you did the second average cost curve, did it not just move to the right so you can see that you get a larger output? Why did it actually not only move to the right, why did it also move down? You might ask that question. Well, the reason is, my dog's barking in the background, the reason is economies of scale. So when we start to see this long run average cost curve going downwards, so we're getting reduced average costs as the output increases, this is what we call economies of scale. And then it reaches a point and then it starts to increase. And that's where, when output increases in the long run, we're starting to see average cost increase, and that is called, you may have guessed, diseconomies of scale. Okay, so there's lots of reasons for economies of scale, and there's lots of reasons for diseconomies of scale, and that will be coming up in another video. But very briefly, make sure that you know the definition of economies of scale. It's where as output increases in the long run, average costs decrease. So we could make it in note form. It's firstly, all it occurs in the long run. As output increases, average costs decrease. And there are many reasons for this: purchasing, risk bearing, technical, managerial, specialisation, lots and lots of reasons. And then just economies of scale occur in the long run. I don't know why I wrote the R before the L then, but in the long run, as output increases, average costs increase as well. You can see it going past that point there. So productive efficiency, again, just like in the short run, in the long run is just where the long run average cost curve is at its lowest point. And there are also other things that you can add on to this diagram as well. I'm going to go on to another slide to add this. So here we go, another slide. So a few other things that we can add into our diagram. Okay, sometimes you get something that looks like that. So we can see from here to here, we're benefiting from increasing our output. So this is economies of scale. And we can see here, the average costs are increasing. So just as on the last slide, it was diseconomies of scale. But here, this shouldn't be going up. That's a bit of a funny line. But here we have constant returns to scale. So the average cost curve is staying at a certain point. So you know, if you're selling more, if you're a business and you can sell that output, you presumably are making more total revenue, so it may be beneficial. But there's between this point and this point, there's no benefit in terms of reducing your average costs, at least in terms of being bigger. So this is constant returns to scale. Here we'd say economies of scale, also known as increasing returns to scale, and then decreasing returns to scale as well. But at the point where it goes to the lowest average cost is what we call the MES. This is the minimum efficient scale, and that's defined as the lowest number of units of output that you need to produce to get to the lowest average cost. And we can also, MES is also a barrier to entry for some firms. So if you have a very high MES, it means that your firm needs to be a certain size to be able to compete with other firms that may have got to that, you know, that very large size and therefore have low average costs. So if I explain it again, I don't think I explained it very well there. If you're this firm and you're operating, you know, this is where your short run average cost curve is, and you're operating at a very low output compared to maybe some other firms in the industry, your costs are up here and they're really, really high, okay? But if you're this firm here and you've reached the MES, your costs are way down here, and that's a lot less. And so, you know, you can have that choice. You can charge a higher price and make a lot of profit, have a very high profit margin, or you can charge a low price and maybe push this firm out of the industry. So that's why it's a barrier to entry, having an MES that's very, very high, because it means that a firm has to be very large to be able to get their average cost down to a low enough level so that they can compete. And obviously, setting up from scratch, it's going to be really hard to go into a new market and set up and be really large, especially if you've got competitors that have developed a lot of brand loyalty. One more thing to show you as well is external economies of scale, and you can have a look in another presentation why these occur, but just to show you the diagram first of all, and its output on this axis and its costs up this side. Sorry, a little bit scruffy. It's hard to do it on an iPad. And what you get is we've got our long run average cost curve and economies of scale. External economies of scale, they look like this. So they push down this long run average cost curve downwards. So that's economies of scale, external economies of scale. And what would external diseconomies of scale look like? It's just going to be the other way around. They're just going to push up that long run average cost curve. So those are the diagrams for economies of scale and mixing in the short run as well. But you do need to be able to explain why economies of scale occur. So have a look at that presentation as well.